In this video, I'm going to talk about the fear of abandonment and how it impacts your love life and where it comes from and what you can do about it so you can finally be with your soulmate. My name is Stefan Gonick. I'm an expert EFT practitioner and founder of the Soulmate Attraction Academy from single to soulmate.me, and this is Love Talk Q&A. Now, there are two universal fears that most people have, and that's the fear of abandonment, which can also be experienced as a fear of rejection, very similar. And then there's we can think of sort of the opposite, which is the fear of engulfment, where a person is afraid of people getting too close, kind of smothering, even invading. They want people to kind of keep their distance. Now, everybody tends to have at least one of these two fears, at least to some degree. And then there's the lucky few that actually have both of them, which makes things even tougher. Now, I have another video about the fear of engulfment and how it impacts your search for your soulmate. And that video is going to come out 1 week after this one comes out. Okay, so now before we get into anything else, what I'd like to do is to have you start by measuring the intensity of your fear of abandonment in the context of a relationship. Right? So just pause the video for a moment and measure your level of fear on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is no fear at all and 10 is like the maximum amount of fear you can imagine having. So go ahead and pause the video for a moment, and then we're going to use that number to talk about its impact on your love life. So go ahead and pause. All right, welcome back. Now, if you didn't actually pause it, you can come back, do the number later and come back and listen to this next part. So, if your fear of abandonment or rejection is between a 7 and a 10, then it's going to have a really big impact on your love life. And I'll get into more about that later. If your level of fear is between a 0 and a 3, it's not going to really have much impact at all. It's nothing you have to worry about. If it's between a 4 and a 6, that means it's going to have a moderate impact in your love life. You'll still probably be okay, but things will be just more difficult and harder than they need to be. But it's not going to be so big that it can really sabotage your love life like between 7 and 10 can. When it's that intense, it can have a huge impact on your love life in a way that can really mess things up for you. So what kind of impact can this have on your love life? Well, in general, it's going to make you very insecure in your relationships because there's going to be that sort of constant background fear that the person can leave at any time or reject you at any time. So it's going to make you feel very insecure. One of the biggest impacts that it can have in your love life is that, again, if it's a fear is pretty intense, it can make you avoid getting together with somebody who is super exciting, somebody you can experience a really big love with, or ultimately even your soulmate. Because think about this. If you have a fear of being abandoned, can you think of how much worse it would be to be abandoned by somebody that you are deeply, madly in love with, right? It's bad enough to be abandoned by anybody, but to be abandoned by somebody that great would just be that much more devastating, right? And overwhelming. So a lot of people, without even realizing it, when they have this big fear of abandonment and rejection, is they'll actually shy away from somebody who seems really great, like in particular the soulmate. And instead, they'll be with someone who they're sort of more moderate. They love them, but they're not like madly in love with them, right? Their feelings are more moderate because then the stakes don't feel so high. So if they feel abandoned by that person, it'll be painful, but it won't be the ultimate devastation that would be with their soulmate or somebody really great like that. So that can be a really big deal in your love life. Then the other kinds of impacts it can have is that once you're in a relationship with somebody, having a fear of abandonment or rejection can make you kind of clingy and needy. And that clinginess and neediness in your relationship can cause the other person to feel kind of dissatisfied and can end up pushing them away. And so ironically, it ends up creating the very outcome you're afraid of, right? Just from your neediness and clinginess. So that's one possibility. Another one is that it can cause you to hide parts of yourself. A lot of people with the fear of abandonment have this fear that if a person, if my partner really gets to know me deeply, then they'll leave me. Right? They'll see me as unacceptable. So therefore, I'm going to hide any parts of myself that I think may not be acceptable, which can end up being a lot of parts of ourselves. And again, this can unfortunately, ironically, create the very outcome we're afraid of. Because if you're hiding a lot of yourself, that means there's not a lot of you in the relationship, which can feel pretty dissatisfying to your partner. And from that dissatisfaction, they may end up leaving anyway. Right? I mean, you're much better off to just bring your full self into the relationship, and they'll either think your full self is great, in which case they really want to be with you and stay together, or they don't like your full self and they'll leave anyway. And that would be the final outcome anyway. So, it's a much better possibility by bringing all of yourself into the relationship. Another negative impact is if you're not fully in the relationship because you're hiding a lot of parts of yourself, then it's hard to feel fully loved by the other person because they don't see all of you, right? They only see a part of you. So it makes you feel sort of partially loved. And it makes you feel, again, this sort of insecure kind of feeling of, is this love going to go away? And also, they don't really fully know me. So I don't feel fully loved. Now, this needy clinging thing I mentioned a little earlier, not only can it create dissatisfaction in the relationship, it can also create a classic dynamic called the distancer-pursuer dynamic that many people experience in their relationships. You probably already have in your own. And it goes like this. A person with a fear of abandonment or rejection will very frequently pair up with somebody with a fear of engulfment. They're complementary pairs. And in the beginning, it's not a problem because in the honeymoon phase, everything's great, right? It's not really an issue. But once the honeymoon phase ends, then everybody starts to become their more natural, normal selves, which means the person with the fear of abandonment is going to feel, again, a little insecure and clingy. The person with the fear of engulfment will experience their insecurity and clinginess as a bit engulfing, and they'll start to pull away a bit. The person with the fear of abandonment will feel them pull away a bit and pursue, right? And they'll get a little bit more clingy and more pursuing, cause the other person to pull away more, pursue, distance, pursue, distance, pursue, distance, pursue, and they keep going. Until eventually the person with the fear of abandonment just gets fed up and gives up, and then they go way over here. And then the person with fear of engulfment is like, I wanted you to back off a little bit, but not so far. Right? And then they come all the way over and they try and win the person back, right? And then if they succeed in winning the person back, then things are good for a while because the person with the fear of abandonment feels more loved, right? But then after a while, their fear of abandonment is going to cause them to start getting insecure and clingy again, and they'll start pursuing, distancing, and it'll just keep happening like that. And this will keep cycling lots of times for people over and over and over again and create a tremendous amount of unhappiness. So that's not fun. And like I said, you've probably already experienced that one before. All right, so as you can see, there's a lot of ways that the fear of abandonment or rejection can really impact your love life in a really big way. So the question is, what can we do about it? Well, in order to answer that question, what we can do about it, we have to understand, where does this fear come from? Because if we can address the fear successfully, that will be what to do about it. So nobody's born with a fear of abandonment or fear of rejection, right? So what causes it are certain categories of painful experiences in childhood is what will ultimately create a fear of abandonment in someone. So what kind of experiences could these be? Well, one of them would be having a parent who's, emotionally distant or emotionally unavailable, or non-loving, right? Because that's sort of a continual rejection or abandonment throughout the whole childhood. So that can do it. Another one that can do it is a very angry, threatening parent. Some parents, when a parent gets really angry and yells at a child, regardless of what they're yelling about, there's this underlying message behind the yelling itself, which is, you're not okay with me, right? I might be mad at you for X, but overall, you right now are not okay with me. And if the parent does that a lot, then that's a very rejecting energy. You're not okay with me is a very rejecting energy, which again can create this fear of rejection or abandonment. Another one that can do that is a very judgmental, critical parent. So when you think about it, if a parent is being critical of some part of us, they're very explicitly saying, this part of you is not okay with me, right? I reject this little part of you. And if they're generally judgmental and critical, they're going to do that a lot. This part of you is not okay with me, and that part of you is not okay with me, and that part of you is not okay with me, and that part of you is not okay with me. And after a while, the person's feeling pretty rejected overall. So again, it'll create a fear of rejection and or abandonment. Other kinds of experiences, though, can cause this. And for instance, parents get divorced. The divorce itself can create a big fear of abandonment, because when one parent moves out, that can be experienced as very abandoning. And then on top of that, if that person, the parent who moves out, isn't very attentive, that can compound the abandonment feeling, right? So sometimes, the parents split up. The split itself can feel very abandoning because one parent has to leave. But sometimes if the parent, is like really gung-ho and spending as much time as possible with the child, that tends to help. But if the parent isn't, and they kind of disappear a bit, and they don't try that hard to see their kid, or when the kid comes to visit, they don't pay much attention to them. That can create a huge fear of abandonment in that child. And then sadly, another source of fear of abandonment is when somebody close in the family dies, right? So it wasn't that person's fault. It's not an intentional abandonment, but it can be a huge abandonment. So, for instance, if a beloved grandparent dies, that can create a fear of abandonment. If one of the actual parents dies, certainly that can do it. Or a sibling dies. Anybody close to them dies when you're still young in childhood, that can create a huge fear of abandonment. It can create this fear in you that you can be abandoned through death, but it tends to generalize to in any way, not just through death. So these are the kinds of experiences that can create a fear of abandonment and or rejection in a person. So then the question is, what do we do about this? Well, when we have an unhealed wounds from childhood that creates a big fear, the fact that these original experiences are not healed means they're sort of raw within us forever, right? Time does not heal all. I work with clients in their 70s who still feel intense feelings from their childhood experiences. So time definitely doesn't heal all. So when you have sort of this raw wound in this part of your childhood, then the possibility of facing that kind of experience again can feel more than we can handle. It feels overwhelming, it feels devastating. But if we can heal that original wound, then we feel strong. Then the possibility of being abandoned or rejection happening again doesn't feel overwhelming. We feel like, yeah, I can handle that. It wouldn't be pleasant, but I can handle it. I feel strong now. So that's what it takes. You need to heal these original wounds. Now, there's a lot of ways to heal these original wounds. You can do regular therapy on it. But in my experience, trying to do that with regular therapy can take a very long time. Years, decades, and depending on the kind of therapy, possibly never. So in my experience, the fastest way to heal these kind of childhood wounds quickly and very thoroughly is with EFT, which is what I use with my clients. So what you do with EFT is you want to heal just a small number of representative example memories of that wound. So for instance, if you have this really angry, yelling parent who's very threatening, you would heal approximately 3 to 5 memories, and that's it. The parent may have done it hundreds of times, but you don't have to heal hundreds of memories, because there's this generalization phenomenon in EFT where you heal just a small subset of all these, hundreds of experiences, and it heals them all. So that's how it works. You just have to heal like 3 to 5 memories of the parent being really angry and yelling, and that wound is done. And 3 to 5 memories take 3 to 5 sessions. Not bad. Now, if you've had more than one of these things, you're going to have to do 3 to 5 sessions per kind of experience. So if you had a very unloving, distant, emotionally distant, unavailable parent, 3 to 5 sessions on that. If you had a very critical, judgmental parent, 3 to 5 sessions on that. If there's a divorce situation, you'll have to do some sessions on that. If somebody dies, a few sessions on that. But the good news is even adding all those up, it doesn't take very long. You're still talking, it's still measured in some limited number of months at the most. Not like many months or definitely not years. It's a very limited number of things. And the really cool thing is once you heal these representative memories, as I said, the wound is healed and the fear greatly diminishes. It can go all the way down to 0 even. But it's certainly down to that 0 to 3 range where it's not a problem anymore. And instead, you feel very solid, you feel very confident, you feel like you can face anything, and you're not scared and insecure in your relationships and clingy anymore, and you're not going to avoid your ultimate partner, your soulmate anymore, because you're not worried about what might happen, right? That fear of being abandoned or rejected. It will have either completely or mostly gone away. So you're going to feel much better about yourself and much stronger. And that's what will help you finally be with your soulmate. Now, this is one of the huge blocks that can prevent you from being with your soulmate, but it's not the only one. I have a free mini course on my website at singletosoulmate.me that talks about 3 key blocks that can keep us from being with our soulmate. And this fear of abandonment that I've been talking about in this video is one piece of one of those 3 key blocks. So there's the other 2 key blocks, and there's the rest of that particular key block. And so if you get my free mini course on my website, you'll learn about all 3 of them and what you can do to break free so that you can successfully address everything in your way of being with your soulmate so you can finally be with your soulmate. So, all right, so I hope this video was helpful. It was. It'd be wonderful if you do me the favor of taking a second to like the video, which would really help me a lot. I invite you to subscribe to the channel to get my latest videos about EFT and finding your soulmate. And keep tapping, clear all your blocks to finding love, and your soulmate will naturally appear. I've seen it happen so many times. So keep tapping, and I'll see you in the next episode of Love Talk Q&A.